Hey, listeners, welcome back to another episode of Rebel Sage Perspectives. You've got me, Rebel, and I've got my amazing guest, Mr. Paul Renteria, who is an actor. Did I say that name right, Paul? Your
You did
last
very
name?
good. I say Renteria.
Oh, no, I can't roll my R's like that. No, no. I tried to do that with my last guest, and I'm sure he was trying not to laugh, but that's okay. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Uh, I would love to know, Paul, why you got started in acting and what drew you to that. Of all the things in the world that you could do, why pick that one?
Well, when I was 7 years old, I had a neighbor with a sunken trampoline in the backyard,
Which
and
are
he
the
had a big
coolest
heavy bag.
things. Yeah.
Pardon?
And
And
those are the coolest things.
yeah, and I was flipping and throwing kicks and yelling and screaming, and he goes, "Who are you?" I go, "I'm Cato. You ought to learn to fight like him." And back in 1966, 67, Cato was Bruce Lee, the Green Hornet.
Oh, yeah.
And I was always fascinated by what he did. Now, I lived in a Mexican neighborhood, and every Mexican neighborhood has a crazy white guy. And this was our crazy white guy, Bob Bramer.
Nice.
He was my mentor. He was like my
Okay.
Mr. Miyagi, like from the Karate Kid.
I
Taught
love
me
it.
a lot of things, kept an eye on me, taught my mom and dad about camping and water skiing and Harleys. This guy was phenomenal. But anyways, about 3 months later, his wife calls my mom and says, "Tell Paul to ride his bike over the house. Cato's coming over." Well, he never told me he knew Bruce Lee. So he introduced me to Bruce Lee. And, for a 7 year old that's seen a guy on TV, this is like meeting Batman, Captain America, you name it.
Heck yes.
And I said, "Bob, I want to be an actor when I grow up." And Bob says, "You can do anything you want." Bob was a Zen master. "Dad, I want to be an actor." "Shut the bleep up, stay in school, and get a job." So, so that was my first inspiration. And then back then, I grew up in Alhambra, California, and a neighbor of ours, another crazy guy, had horses. He rode in the Rose Parade. He'd have poker games with John Wayne and Glenn Ford. And I would see these guys, but I didn't understand it because, it was too surreal. And my cousin took care of his horses, which is now all city. So I was inspired by those two things, horses and acting. And by the time I was 13, I kept asking Bob, "How come you never got into the movies?" And he rode dirt bikes with Steve McQueen, worked out with like I say, Bruce Lee. So that was those were my big inspirations.
I love that. So, wow, I think if I'd had the same things happen, I might have gone the acting route. That that's a great story.
And then as I got older, I started realizing I had multiple personalities. So the only way for me to be sane was to visit my 24 multiple personalities. So that contributed to my acting.
Okay.
And when I was 19, 18, I rode my horse across the set of the Incredible Hulk, not knowing that they were filming on the trails where I used to ride.
Whoop.
And they saw me ride, and they go, "Do you want a job?" I go, "Yeah." I was on a big 17 hand mare that was bucking and kicking. She's
Right.
acting like a stallion, and they saw me ride, and they said, "Do you want a job?" I go, "Yes." And so my job was to hold horses in between takes. And after about 3 or 4 days, all the Mexican families were coming out eating craft services, and they wanted to touch Lou Ferrigno and the guest stars. And they asked me to do security. And after about a week, they said, "Son, don't get a fat head, but you're tall. You can speak Spanish. You can definitely ride a horse. We can use you in the production company." Mom, Dad, they want me in the movies. Oh, no, 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 no. Go get a real job. So I'd met a legendary actor, L.Q. Jones, and I think he put in the word to the production. This guy can write. You can use him. We talked every day, and he told me, if you ever do anything, get in the theater. And this L.Q. had been the late L.Q. had been in the Wild Bunch, one of the greatest westerns ever. So make a long story short, started on the railroad, and within a couple months, they had me protecting film crews filming around the railroad tracks. So
Wow.
so it was like magical. And so producers, directors, actors, I don't think they'd ever seen a Mexican guy like me. And they suggested I pursue acting. So this was at 19. It wasn't until I was 30 that I decided to wake up and pursue acting.
Oh, wow. That's a long bit of time to think
Yeah,
about
yes,
it.
it is. Yes, it is.
So, what made you change your mind? What made you say, "Well, maybe I should follow my dream"?
Well, what I need to tell you is that before I joined the railroad, I had a cooperative education job, and I worked for this big mean cowboy that didn't like anybody, Mormon cowboy, but he liked my
Right.
work. And I was a draftsman, a teenage draftsman, because I had a 2 year degree at 19. Not too many people do that, but he would invite me to his parties, and I wouldn't go. And he had a Porsche collection, and somebody at work said, "Those Porsches are his brother-in-laws." I go, "Who's his brother-in-law?" "Well, Robert Redford." So that was another sign that
Right.
Hollywood was calling me, and I was too young and dumb. I was too stupid to follow up on these leads. So by the time I was 30, I had a good railroad career going, and I said I need to do something else. So I immediately started taking acting classes, and within 6 weeks, I took a commercial workshop, and I had two agents that wanted to sign me. So that was a good sign.
I would say that's definitely a good sign.
Yeah, and I think within a year or within 6 months, I had a commercial, and magical things kept happening.
That's great.
And at the core of my body, my roots, my ancestors were cowboys, and so if I could make a living being a cowboy and riding fence, I would probably do that. And that's why I still railroad, because I'm still out. I'm like in the middle of a western every day. I'm transported back into time 100 years ago.
Right.
And I don't rush because I'm always looking for gold laying in the riverbeds.
Do you find any?
Not yet, but I'm looking.
One day, right?
Exactly. So when I was 30, I wrote. I realized it was a great career, it's something I could do forever, and then by the time I got 50, I was on fire. I had some big movies. Now, don't ever promise a kid anything. Uh, I was promised by 9 years old by my neighbors that they bought me two Pendletons and were going to take me to North Dakota, and they were going to take me to their two brothers or 30,000 acre cattle ranches. We're going to ride horses. We're going to fish. We're going to chase cattle. And so I waited 45 years for that trip. And it never happened. And I did a big movie called Due Date, and the director wanted me for Hangover 3. And that went from 90 days to 60 days to 30 days. They ultimately wanted someone else or went with someone else. And the railroad said, "Would you go to North Dakota for a year?" And I go, "Yeah." So I ended up going to North Dakota in the Southwest for a couple of years. I stepped away from Hollywood, got older, got grayer, couldn't memorize as good, and that's what happens. You leave Hollywood, you're out of sight, you're out of mind. But it's okay
Yeah.
because I really had to take those journeys, you know. And so,
Yeah.
anyways, and so I came back to LA, kind of had to like restart all over again, but it's okay. Before I was the young big guy, now I'm a big older guy. But there's grandpas, and there's not many people out there like me at 63 could still ride horses and Harleys, jet
Right.
ski and boat. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. The universe works in mysterious ways.
It does. And honestly, I love to pay attention and just watch how things go and I love to acknowledge when something happens. Like, you know, I saw that, I felt that was coming, and then it happened, you know,
Right.
and that's great. It's a great feeling. It's like success, better than any pat on the back from a boss.
Exactly.
So, so you do ride Harleys. What is your favorite Harley?
Well, put it this way, I've got three,
Okay,
and you can only ride one at a time. Now, I know somebody with 30 Harleys, and I know somebody with 60 Porsches, and you can't drive all of them at once.
that's true.
And I won a bike contest, and I went to Jay Leno's garage. It was one of the prizes, and he's got over 150 motorcycles and over 300 cars.
Yeah,
He has a staff of seven. Unfortunately, I heard he just got burned yesterday in an
I
accident.
did hear that.
But so the moral of the story is I don't have any favorites. I like a lot of things. I got a buddy with six boats, and I used to wonder why. He had a different boat for each day, for each type of activity. And then my
Right,
buddy that has a 60 Porsches, he's got over 10 boats. So when you got that kind of money and you want to do certain things, whether it's lounging or whether it's skiing or whether it's fishing or, there's just all sorts of choices.
right. So
So nothing is perfect.
that is true. I would say I like the late 80s Softails. I worked at, well, it was formerly Leewood Harley Davidson in Denton. Is it Denton? I don't know, just north of Dallas. And that was my favorite style. I just thought those looked so awesome. And I was like, someday, my someday is still in front of me. But, you know, I think Harleys are awesome. I loved working there. And um, as far as I could see maybe owning a couple cars, but I don't think I would probably ever own a lot of cars. But
I
even
only have 10 vehicles and it's tough to keep up with the registrations.
yeah, it probably is. Honestly, I would get myself an early 80s Porsche 911 Turbo in red. It's got to have the fin on the back because I'm old school like that. So, but yeah, so what are you working on currently? Do you have something going on at this moment?
Well, I am I retired from the railroad and I became this first state of California railroad bridge inspector ever. So I take pride in that. And
Wow.
I have adventures, and because of COVID, a lot of the auditioning process changed. So I think word is getting out that this old dude is back. And so wherever I go, I carry a mobile screen behind me, and I have tripods, and I have O rings, and I've been
Right.
auditioning quite a bit.
Yeah.
Wherever I'm at, there's no excuses. And I used to have my friends, my wife, my neighbor. Can you film me? And it was really Mickey Mouse. I threw a lot of work away. Now that I'm controlling it with a, I don't know if you know this, but on my cell phone you can do a Bluetooth camera activator. It
Okay.
just, I'm a late bloomer. I only learned that a
Uh,
couple months ago. But
right.
my auditions are coming out very powerful. And I did a film 12 years ago that just came out last October
Whoa.
with Hanus Kaminsky, and he's won 2 Academy Awards with Steven Spielberg. It's called
Mhm.
American Dream. Since that
Right.
come out, I've been getting a lot of, generated a lot of interest, and so I'm really excited. And I've had some very big auditions in the past few weeks. As a matter of fact, I've got a big commercial gig tomorrow, and
Good.
I'm excited.
Congratulations.
My first one in person in 2 years. So that means
Wow.
they really want to see me. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. That's
So
great.
and I have two films. Like I say, American Dream, I think it's on Prime Video. And
Oh,
another,
okay.
another one called Santa Muerte, and it's on Hulu TV.
Okay. Cool.
So, like I say, I've got buddies that are big stars, and I never wanted to be a star. But as long as I stay healthy, well, I'm still in the swim, you know?
You're still working, and that's a
Yeah,
lot
exactly.
more than some of the younger kids can say.
And I like mailbox money, which means when you're sleeping, residuals arrive.
Right?
That is a blessing,
Right. I
and
would think
that
so.
fills up my three Harleys and my RV.
Yeah, that's true. So I understand that we, well, that I have interviewed quite a few people from a play you were
Yes,
once in.
yes.
Tell me about that. Tell me some good stories.
Well, I did a play called The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit, written by Ray Bradbury, who's well known for he's well known for the Fahrenheit 451, I believe. He's
Right.
a science fiction writer, but I got to back up a little bit.
Okay.
When I became an actor, I was doing scenes, plays in bars, little theaters, and twice the director would call off the meeting or the show because there was only two people in the audience. And I says, you cannot do that anymore. We were in Hollywood in the little black box theater, bare bones. It was raining. It was cold. There's only four people there, and it was miserable. And the director wanted to cancel. I says, "You don't know who these people are. We got the show must go on." And in one of the shows previously, the director was a big time director looking for actors, Latino actors. So in this case, we're out there and the show's about to begin, and a white limousine pulls up in the rain, and Ray Bradbury gets out, and he comes in and watches his play we're performing. And afterwards, he told me, he says, "You know what? This is the best version of my play I've ever seen." And it's been on Broadway and off Broadway and
Right.
off
Right.
Broadway. And he says, "I'm going to come back." And every other week till closing time, he came back. And on the last night, Ray says, "I'm going to recommend you to Disney Studios for the film version of The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit." Well, a year later, I got called in. I didn't get the part, but I got called in. And so Ray used to say, work begets work. In other words, magical things happen. He believed in magic.
Right.
So fast forward 9 years, the wonderful suit comes up again 9 years later, produced by Ray Bradbury at his own theater. And I'd already done it, right? So what happens? I decide to go read just for the heck of it. And it's in an old neighborhood near where I grew up. It was across the street from a church where my grandmother had her funeral. And I go, this is a sign. And then what the wonderful ice cream suit is about is five Latino kids who can't afford a magical suit, so they all rent it each night from each other, and they chip in. So one kid happens to go into a bar and he gets kind of beat up by my character Toro, which is the bull.
The bull. Right. Right.
And so what happens is in the as we're reading the play, well, the ambulance is arriving, and I swear a real ambulance passed by. Woo! So that was another sign. And as they're
Right.
cutting off the pants and taking them away, the ambulance leaves, and another ambulance in real life passes by. Woo! So I go, I got to do this play. But this time I learned that whenever I do a play, I need to have an understudy. And once you know it, with we did the play for about a month, and it got extended, I believe, another month, and then I got asked by Harley Davidson to film in New Mexico and Chihuahua, Mexico, and so I had an understudy. So that's how I met your buddies. Is that wild?
That's great.
And Ray Bradbury was there every weekend. And what I was
Wow.
excited about, a lot of TV stars from the 60s and 70s, one in particular came up to me and told me he'd seen the play on Broadway and off Broadway, and that nobody portrayed the character like I did. And the thing is, Ray had it written for Latinos, and to have anybody else in there was okay. This guy is acting in this where they felt I was the real guy, and I pretty
Right.
much dressed like a biker, So the audience said, "Man, this guy looks like he's a real biker."
Lo and
So
behold, he was.
there you go. So that was very very interesting and just exciting.
That's really cool. Yeah, so our mutual acquaintance. Now, were you guys in the play at the same time?
Who's that?
Were you and Rudy, were you in
Yes,
the
yes.
play at
Rudy
the
was
same
one of
time?
the yes.
Okay.
Rudy was one of the guys that was renting the suit.
Right. And then you had some of my other or well, the other podcast interviewees too in there with you. Joaquin
Yes,
Garay
yes.
and now I'm drawing a blank. I shouldn't have gone that route. I'm like, Joaquin, I remember that.
Well, there were five guys. I don't even remember all their names now. I think there was Eddie and Joaquin and Rudy and
We interviewed Eddie. Yep.
Daniel.
Daniel, no, I have not
Okay,
had him on yet.
okay.
So, but yeah, Rudy talks about the play just with great memories of it. So, uh, but yeah, that's really cool. It's such a small world that we live in where everybody knows everybody. And I think Hollywood is kind of smaller than people think it is, really.
Exactly.
And so, and you've also been in at least one thing, probably more, with somebody I am determined I want to have on my show, and that's Danny Trejo.
Yes.
So you were in something with him, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you how I first met him.
Okay.
Um, I have a place in Baja, 200
Oh,
miles south of LA, and that's
yeah,
in Mexico.
right.
And I went to my favorite taco stand, and I got a buddy who's big dude, and he looks like Danny, rough looking face. And we went to my favorite taco place, Danny's Tacos. And Danny's Tacos says, "Hey, we're catering a movie. Why don't you guys ride over there?" So we ride over there, and here comes Danny Trejo out on the beach in Baja. Down the there's this abandoned casino, and Danny comes up and he goes, "You guys ride bikes?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "From LA?" I go, "Yeah." He thought that was crazy, and I said, "What's wrong with that? Why don't you do it?" And he was afraid of getting kidnapped and his kids and blah blah blah, and I understand that, but I go, "You're Machete. You're the baddest dude in the world. What are you afraid of, right?"
Right.
I'm not afraid. So So a lot of times when people will say, "You could be like Machete," and I go, "Well, I think Machete wishes he could be like me." But he was also like a 12-year boxing champ. I understand. He's a tough dude. He's a small guy, but he's a tough dude. Anyways,
Yeah.
we exchanged numbers, and he says, "We got to work together." That's Hollywood talk. Well, I swear to you, a year later, we're both on The Young and the Restless. He's a bartender, and I'm a cop, and that's in my demo reel.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
And then through the motorcycle world, I've run into him a few times, and then I've got another great buddy, Emilio Rivera, the leader of the Mayans TV show, and
Hmm.
they have the same agent. So we all bump into each other. They're the stars, and I don't want to be a star. And God bless them for all the good work they're doing, but
Yeah.
I just like to roll under the radar. I'm a big boy and I love to eat. Whenever I go to places with Emilio, people want his autograph, want to take a picture, so I got to eat his food. And the first time if you're a star and you don't sign an autograph, well, then you're a big jerk on
You're
the internet.
rude. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't need that in my life,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. And so I still like to travel under the radar. But yeah, Danny's a cool dude. He's my inspiration as well. He's 76 and I'm 63, so it's giving me hope.
Yeah.
You
That
know,
is That is pretty cool. I'm determined, Paul. At some point, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to reach the right person. And Danny is going to be like, yes, Rebel, I will come on your podcast. Please stop talking about it.
Well, I will email you his agent's information.
Oh, that's even better.
But yeah, you can start there. Said you want to put Danny's face in or voice in Tennessee? Why not?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, you might not know this, Paul, but the podcast is heard internationally.
Excellent.
It's heard in over 32 countries.
Wow.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, but yeah, um, I forget where I was going next, but uh, what else? What else have you been doing? What was your favorite? And I know this is a hard question usually for my guests, but what was your favorite job that you did? Or maybe if you don't want to nail that down, because some people don't, you could tell me about something unique that happened that left an impression on you.
Okay, first of all, I am a Chicano dude.
Yes,
And the way and that means I'm a part of I'm part of the native and Spanish culture that's been here since the before the arrival of the Mayflower. And anyways, I wrote to. I'm going to explain real quick, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but this is my truth. My pop told me that our Spanish ancestors raped our Apache ancestors, and they made us the world's best cowboys, vaqueros, 100 years before the
vaqueros.
Mayflower,
Yes.
and they're still trying to throw us out. And the Europeans couldn't say vaquero, so they said buckaroo.
Hmm.
Anyways, in World War One, they didn't want us in the army. By World War Two, they were drafting us in droves. They wanted us to
Right.
go fight. So my dad won 3 Purple Hearts, and the moral of the story is he wanted to be in the cavalry. They only wanted the Mexicans to wash the horses and clean the stalls. They didn't want them in parades. They didn't want them in public. So he still won 3 Purple Hearts in the tank battalion, but that's a lot of pride for me. So because of
Yes.
that, my favorite job, I'm just leading up to what one of my favorite gigs was.
Right.
I wanted to be a writer, so I wrote to all the CEOs, chief executive officers of all the American beer companies, and I said, Chicano guys like me, they're the biggest group of beer drinkers that I know of, yet we are invisible in your advertising. So,
Right.
so Miller Lite called my bluff, and they put me in 8 Miller Lite national commercials with Burt Reynolds, Jerome Bettis,
Nice.
Triple H. It was magical, and that was just fantastic. And Miller Lite is across the street from Harley Davidson in Milwaukee. So that
I've
led
been there. Yep.
that led Harley Davidson to film me as well, and Chevy.
Nice.
So those were great gigs. And they did ask me, would you mind going on a private jet to the Middle East, perform for the troops and the Super Bowl? And I go, yeah, let's do it. And well, Coors took over Miller Lite, and they changed their whole advertising. So that
Yeah.
never happened. But I got to meet director Peter Farrelly, who's since won an Academy Award, and I've run into him in theater in L.A.
Sure.
We had a mutual friend that he grew up with, and I studied with. So that's been exciting. But that was a great gig. And then I did anger management, and with Jack Nicholson, Adam Sandler.
Right.
My whole thing to study was that I knew someday I was going to sit across from Robert De Niro or Jack Nicholson. Got to work with Jack. So every day going to work with Jack Nicholson, Adam Sandler, John Turturro, Luis Guzman. I felt like I was on the bench with the New York Yankees or on stage with the Rolling Stones. I wasn't the star,
Right.
but I was
Right.
there. And when they
You were a
hired me,
star just for being there.
exactly. And so when they hired me, it was an afterthought because they needed some more actors, and then they wanted to go back to New York to reshoot. And they said, "Would you be willing to go to New York?" I go, "Yes," but it was contingent on the Lakers losing in the playoffs, so that Jack would leave LA. And the moral of the story is, the Lakers kept going, so they scratched the plan to go back to New York. So if you watch Anger Management, I'm in their class, but when they do the celebration, they filmed it while they were in New York.
Ah,
And I'm going to tell you something interesting real quick. When I was working with Jack, offset, he talked in Spanish, we talk about Mexican food, and he does look like a real wolf. And but
that
his
does
whole
not surprise me.
his whole character, his shades, his speech reminded me of my mentor, Bob Bramer. So you got to
Right.
realize Bob was known as the Chinatown ass kicker. All these stars wanted to study with Bruce, and
Yeah.
Bob would have to see if they could pass muster. He, spar with him. He
Yep.
cleaned out most of them. That's why he became known as the Chinatown ass kicker. Now, I don't want to ramble on, but Bob had a brother Freddie,
Hmm.
and we lived on Elm Street. And when I was a kid, Bob would go outside for Halloween with his fedora and a flashlight under his face and scare us, jump out of the bushes.
Yeah.
Then he was a welder, so he made a big steel hand out of 45-degree angle iron and put it over his welding glove. Well, I said, listen to this. Wes Craven, who wrote and directed Nightmare on Elm Street, was
Right.
friends with Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee and Into the Dragon jacked Bob's idea with Clawhand. And then Wes Craven came up with Freddy Krueger. And I
Right.
believe you can read many stories, but I believe Bob was our inspiration.
Oh, it
And
seems like it.
yeah, and then we had a brother Freddie, and we lived on Elm Street in Alhambra, California. And anyways, John Saxon, who was in Into the Dragon, the actor, was then put into Nightmare on Elm Street as a detective. And then John Saxon played in many westerns as a Mexican or an Indian on Bonanza. I go, wait a minute, I could do that. So all these confluences came together,
Right.
and now I've just had so many incredible things happen, and they continue to happen. Coincidence, synchronicity. So I'm just glad to be walking and talking.
Some days I feel the same way.
Exactly.
So, yep. Well, I try, Paul, not to take up too much time. So I'm going to offer you the same respect and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on and chat with me. Um, I love the stories that you've told me and finding out more about you. And now I'm going to have to go back and watch some of these movies. Like Anger
Excellent.
Management, I haven't seen that in a while. I need to go rewatch it now.
I got to tell you another quick story about anger management.
Okay.
When you're in an acting scene, whether the camera is on you or not, you're still emoting, you're still in the scene. It's like a football game. The
Right.
camera may not be on you, but you're still on that field blocking, tackling, looking for the football, or chasing the ball, right?
Right.
So when I was in anger management, we're in a big circle, and the director comes up to me. He goes, I've been watching you. You're emoting. I need to catch you on film. He goes, next week, we're going to give you more lines and do close ups. So I'm like excited. We filmed all week. So no acting book or acting class ever told me to stay out of the sun. So that Saturday, I rode my Harley to the beach. The next day, I rode to the desert, and I came back to the set with big raccoon eyes, sunburned face. They filmed all the tights, close ups, but I didn't match. So that stuff never made the
So they
screen.
can use it.
So now when I'm
Wow.
in a gig, I'm like, can't get out in the sun. Got to be prepared. But
Yeah.
that was incredible. And then the the director and the assistant director, they told me, wow, good stuff. And I gotta, Michelle, I know we're trying to get off here, but I got to tell you
That's
my
okay.
last story. My last
Sure.
story.
No problem.
I did this film I was telling you with Hanush Kamitsky, and the second AD, the second director, his name is Jim. He worked on Training Day, and I get a scene where I'm pretty violent, and he tells me, he goes, I had seen him years later on an airplane. He says, I didn't tell you, but I worked around some rough guys, in Training Day, and he says nobody scared him like I did. I go, well, it's just acting.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. Actually,
Yeah,
Paul,
yeah.
people say that about me being scary, but I just don't see it. I'm like, I'm not scary. I'm not. Do I look scary? I'm not scary. And they're like, oh no, you're terrifying. But I don't know. It just must be my vibe. But yes, thank you so much again for coming on. And if you have anything that you would like to shout out, social media, website, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever.
I'm on Facebook,
Okay.
Paul Renteria, Renteria. And I am on IMDb, that's the Internet Movie Database.com. And it's been a wonderful ride, and my best stuff is uh, ahead of me.
Absolutely.
In honor to my parents, they thought I was nuts to be an actor, and I says, "Mom, Dad, I've been watching you guys. That's what makes me sane." But I just had one quick little story.
Okay.
I did a movie, Harsh Times, with Christian Bale, Freddie Rodriguez, and I walked into a bar and they were selling a gun to my buddy Emilio. And my character, Ranchero, was upset because Eddie, the bartender, Emilio, it turned out his daughter. So I smack him over the head with a bottle. I stab him in the neck and I throw him on the floor, and the whole audience goes, ah! They were scared. And
Sure.
and just like less than 3 weeks before my dad passed, he was able to walk into the theater. And we saw this movie, Harsh Times. And I go, Mom, Dad, what'd you think? What's the big deal? We've seen that in East LA for over 40 years.
And you're like, well, that's correct. So,
Well,
well,
thank you very much. And it was an honor. And even though I don't want to be famous, when people reach out to me, I try to help others.
yes, and I love that. You guys, he was so quick to respond to my inquiry about being on the podcast. And it's been great to talk to you, Paul. I know I already said that, but I'm going to repeat myself because I want you to make sure you know that I'm really excited to have gotten to talk to you.
Excellent.
So,
Thank you.
all right, listeners. Well, that wraps up another episode of Rebel Sage Perspectives. I hope you're still listening. And hi to Clichy France because I haven't said hi to y'all lately. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.